From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Getting ready for a cicada invasion. With a viral educational video you can't unsee. Tornadoes, heavy rain, high winds. What's behind the recent rash of severe weather?
Really cranking up the dynamics in the atmosphere to create severe weather. As
producers' concerns grow about the bottom line.
The response was smaller operations are going to struggle.
The latest survey of what's on farmers' minds right now on AgDay.
AgDay, presented by Pioneer. What's next happens when the name on the cap matches the power of one's purpose. Pioneer. What's next happens here.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Later this week, we'll get some new supply-demand numbers from USDA. But a lot is already riding on this year's crop production, with a margin squeeze setting in across farm country. And as Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan reports, those concerns are showing up in the latest Ag Economist Monthly Monitor.
As farmers across the U.S. continue to plant, there's a lot riding on this year's crop, and ag economists are watching closely.
In some cases, relative to the previous month, the responses were a little more positive, but relative to last year, there's still this concern of things are somewhat worse off relative to where we were 12 months ago.
University of Missouri ag economist Scott Brown helps author the Ag Economist's Monthly Monitor. And while this month's monitor didn't produce much change in net farm income expectations or the overall ag economic situation, economists are watching an eroding net farm income picture on farms this year.
One of the biggest concerns by far is this margin squeeze. I mean, when you really start looking at 24 budgets, I think the word I would use is ugly.
Dr. Michael Langemeyer is one of 70 ag economists surveyed in the Monthly Monitor. He also helps author Purdue University's Ag Economy Barometer each month.
It looks as bad as 19, maybe even slightly worse.
The April Ag Economist's Monthly Monitor, though, also asked a question about the risk of consolidation in the row crop side of ag.
Almost resoundingly, they said yes.
In the April Monthly Monitor, economists were asked if the current environment of declining commodity prices and high input costs accelerate consolidation in row crop operations and allied industries, and nearly 80% said yes.
When you think about we're headed to what's likely a period of tighter margins, I think the economists were saying, hey, that just is going to make this competition to get bigger to try to offset some of the tighter margins work in their operations.
Economists point out geographies at the greatest risk of consolidation are the Great Plains, Corn Belt, and Southeast Cotton Belt. Economists also think the size of an operation matters.
The response was smaller operations are going to struggle. Those maybe more highly leveraged are going to struggle. Operations are going to look to grow to try to offset what are going to be tighter margins. That seemed to be kind of the overwhelming response that we saw from the economists.
Economists in the Monthly Monitor also say anywhere that has high cash rents or land ownership is scarce are at the greatest risk of consolidation. And Langemeyer says another driving factor of possible growing consolidation could be ag tech.
One of the questions we asked on the barometer that's going to be released in May, do you primarily buy used or new machinery? And there's a bunch of people say they buy used machinery. So guess what? They're behind the technology curve, and to the extent that this precision agriculture technology, artificial intelligence, digital agriculture, the extent that all of these things are profitable, at least are potentially profitable, there's going to be a segment that's left behind.
All right, thanks, Tyne. Now, severe storms barreled through the Midwest, spawning tornadoes. Tornadoes were first reported Tuesday in parts of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, but we've had a stormy couple of weeks now across the heartland. In fact, USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says we saw 380 tornadoes in the U.S. in April, making it the second highest month on record for tornadoes. So what's driving not just this severe weather, but this wet weather that's sidelining planting in many areas? Drew Lerner of World Weather says one factor is the transition from El Nino to La Nina.
We're really cranking up the dynamics in the atmosphere to create severe weather. And quite often when we transition from an El Nino to a La Nina year, we can get kind of a little more excited with some of the severe weather. It's really La Nina years that are most numerous with the severe weather outbreaks. But this particular year, with all the cold air that's coming down periodically and the very warm, we had all kinds of warmth around in February, so the atmosphere is already really primed for the warm and the humid. So we just are getting those contrasts to take place. And the upper wind flow pattern is just kind of allowing for very little change to take place.
The learner says we keep repeating the same weather pattern, and he expects that to continue for another couple of weeks. Another concern with all of this rain is flooding. Meteorologist Matt Engelbrecht joins us with an update.
Yeah, of course, so we can always concentrate on the severe weather, as there are still going to be some strong thunderstorms in and across the area. But in terms of coverage, the flooding potential is greater in and across the United States coming up on Thursday. You get the green, which is about a 5 to 15% chance of flooding in and across parts of the Midwest, all the way back down to the East Coast and back here into Texas, where we get to the 15 to 40% chance of flooding potential. That's on Thursday. As you get into Friday, this entire system that caused the severe weather earlier in the week continues to move off to the east, and that presents the possibility of some flooding in and across parts of Georgia, South Carolina, as well as a little bit into Florida again on Friday. The weekend forecast keeps some flooding potential out of there for Saturday and Sunday. And in fact, the pattern overall starts to quiet down into the weekend and next week. Something that we're going to take a look at coming up in just a little bit. And go ahead and take a look at your screen there. Despite all the recent rain and severe weather, Matt Nelson of Northeast Nebraska says there was a pretty sunset. And I agree with that. In fact, those are some showers. The right side of that picture looks like some rain trying to fall down from the sky with that setting sun. I'll have more in your forecast coming up.
Well, portions of the Kansas wheat crop remain in a drought. A much bigger Oklahoma wheat crop is expected this year. The Oklahoma Wheat Commission estimating the state's wheat crop to be more than 89.1 million bushels with an average yield of 33.68 bushels to the acre. And the average wheat production estimate among members surveyed at a meeting of the Oklahoma Grain and Feed Association, where the tour numbers were released, was even higher at 102.2 million bushels and a yield of 37.3 bushels per acre. Now, USDA's initial winter wheat crop estimates will be released on Friday. Another USDA supply demand report is due out tomorrow. We'll get a preview from Michelle Rook next. And the education about cicadas you never knew you needed. You have to see these educators who went out on a limb, literally, in the country. One of California's wealthiest farm families is planning a mega warehouse complex that could reshape the state's Kern County. Now, we've told you before about billionaire farmers Stuart and Linda Resnick. They are the makers of Halos, Palm Wonderful, and Fiji Water, and own the Wonderful Company. The Los Angeles Times reporting the company plans to significantly expand its industrial park in Kern County. The move would more than double the size of their current industrial park, converting 1,800 acres of almond groves into additional warehouse space. It's driven by the growing demand for online shopping fulfillment centers. The expansion is expected to create up to 50,000 jobs. However, the project has raised concerns among locals about potential negative environmental and health impacts, but the company plans to mitigate those by building a terminal for more efficient cargo handling. The entire project is still in the planning phase. Corn and soybeans continuing to push lower midweek. AgDay's Michelle Rook looks ahead to what this week's supply and demand report could mean for markets now.
Joining us with markets, Tom Fitzgerald with Summit Commodity Brokerage. And Tom, we have the big WASDE coming up on Friday. And of course, this is the first time we're going to see new crop estimates, right?
Trade estimates are looking for a carry out on corn of about 2.287. So, that's what 200 million, I guess, higher than the old crop carry out, which is a bit bearish. On the other hand, it's not all that different from the actually, it's a little bit less than the outlook numbers where they came out in February. So I don't know that. I mean, it's a bearish number on its face, but a lot of that's already been talked about and factored into the market, I think. On soybeans, they're looking at the carry out about 436, which is up almost 100 million bushel from what the 23-24 carry out was. and is almost perfectly in line with the USDA's February outlook number. So again, a bearish number. On the other hand, are people really going to be looking at bearishly, or are they going to say, well, South America wasn't as good as they thought it was going to be, and we're having a little late planning and this and that? Maybe they're going to ignore the bearishness and look at some of those potentially positive things, and so you end up with somewhat of a neutral report.
Tom, talk about the South American numbers, because there's a big discrepancy between USDA and CONAB. Do you think we'll see that rectified at all in this report?
I think it will be a little bit. I think that's going to be a gradual process. Might take into the middle of the summer to get that accomplished. USDA has been reluctant to make changes until we get farther into harvest on soybeans, and that's the Brazilian harvest is about 95-96% complete. Just some areas in Rio Grande do Sul that have been too wet to get harvested. So that reconciliation should start to take place in a big way soon. Whether it'll show up in Friday's report in a big way, probably doubtful. But I think you're going to start to see that spread in our law.
Okay, thanks for joining us as always, Tom Fitzgerald, Summit Commodity Brokerage, and we'll have more AgDay coming up.
Watch Markets Now with Michelle Rook on the Farm Journal YouTube channel, keeping you updated throughout the day on the markets at the open, midday, and close. Find out what moved the markets today and what to expect the market to do next.
If I remember earlier, we were looking at the flooding potential. Now we go over to the severe weather potential, and where you see that red, a possibility is for several severe storms, mainly the Gulf Coast states, Texas, all the way into Georgia, parts of South Carolina, and then back up here to the north with a few severe thunderstorms possible back into North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, even in Ohio. Now that's coming up on Thursday. Into Friday, we lose that red, but still looking at the potential for some severe weather, but also remember that overlap. The flooding potential is there as well. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. We're going to see the potential for severe weather in some of these locations, the Gulf Coast states, but also tack on also the possibility of some heavy rain and flooding. Let's go and take a look at it from a precipitation estimate perspective. So again, that low pressure system that brought the severe weather earlier in the week will continue to move towards the east and kind of drag a lot of the rain with it back in the area of the Gulf Coast states and then up here to the north as well. Check out eastern North Carolina. Looking at about 2 to 3 inches of rainfall through the course of our Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Same thing into Georgia and South Carolina, where we set up some of these training thunderstorms with that west to east movement with the storms. That means we can get some training and pockets of some very heavy rainfall in a small area. All the way back up here towards the Midwest, this is mainly going to be Thursday. By Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, things will try to dry back out. And speaking of which, I want to show you that overall pattern. You got a ridge of high pressure trying to develop the elongated trough that really isn't going to do much in the way of severe weather in terms of stacking the upper levels and the surface, but it will be, the energy at the surface will be enough for severe weather and flooding. By Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we got a weak clipper system, a trough that's going to dig to the east coast, but keep things quiet back here Saturday and Sunday into parts of, the plains and even the Midwest. Bosworth, Missouri, partly cloudy, high around 69 degrees, low of 50. Perry, Utah, partly cloudy, high of 63, low of 47. Rockport, Tennessee, be on the lookout for some morning thunderstorms, high of 82 degrees.
Beef exports are battling against higher prices and lower supplies, so how are shipments doing? We'll have details next. And later, you've heard about the hordes of cicadas emerging this season, but I bet you haven't had it explained like this today in the country. Beef export value appears to be on the rise right now. The U.S. Meat Export Federation saying beef exports in March were below last March large volume, but export value was the highest since June of last year. March beef exports totaled more than 108,000 metric tons. That's down 10% from March of a year ago, but is the highest so far of 2024.
I think on the beef side, we're starting to see quite a few markets contributing to this. You know, we have the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic, the Middle East, but we also have relatively big numbers going into some of the larger markets, which even though they're down slightly year on year, Mexico, Korea, and Japan all had relatively solid months. I think you can attribute, especially in Japan and Korea, some of that strength to the rebounding food service sector.
January to March beef exports totaled more than 311,000 metric tons. That's down 4% from the first quarter of last year, but export value has increased. Ticks are something producers in the beef and dairy industries battle every year, but one poses a serious threat to livestock right now. We're talking about the Asian longhorn tick. The CDC reporting last month Asian longhorn ticks have been spotted in 19 states. Now, when Farm Journal's bovine veterinarian first reported on them back in 2022, they were in 17 states. The ticks, which originated in East Asia, feed on many hosts. Large numbers of them can infest a single host, impacting growth, performance, and milk production. They also can cause disease in cattle by infecting red blood cells. In extreme cases, an infestation can cause cow deaths due to blood loss. In a study by Ohio State back in 2021, researchers found nearly 10,000 ticks in roughly 90 minutes in one Ohio cow pasture. And despite applying pesticides, the ticks were still present in the same pasture in 2022. They recommend targeting them early in the season before the adult ticks lay eggs. Ticks aren't the only things you'll find in pastures and on trees this summer. Up next, a somewhat unique explanation of the cicada invasion expected to arrive this spring in the country. In Illinois, forestry employees are helping prepare people for an impending invasion of cicadas. And in the process, they have struck comedy gold with a viral video that is both educational and, to be honest, it's a little quirky. Take a look.
Where we are in the life cycle right now is the cicadas are hiding right just below the soil surface and emerge when the temperatures are right. It's roughly around 64 degrees soil temperature. And they'll come out, crawl up trees or other inanimate objects like garages and stuff, and they will crawl out of their exoskeletal shell, which is the shell that they were in the nymph form, and they'll emerge as an adult. And at this point, they're soft-bodied. They're kind of white. They haven't really gotten their true colors yet. It takes about 2 to 3 days for their bodies to firm up, their new exoskeletons to firm up, and they become their true colors. They get to like a really dark brown, almost black color. Their wings become this really bright orange, which is very cool, and they'll have the distinctive red eyes. And after about a week after they emerge, the males will go crawl up to the tops of the trees and start singing to attract mates. And when they do this, the females will start to fly around them, and if they want to show that a male is, worthy of her, she will flick her wings at him and they will mate.
Say, girl, if I was a fruit fly, I'd land on you first because you're so sweet.
And then the female cicada she'll lay her eggs on branches and even main stems of trunks. What she does is she cuts a groove into the branch to get to the vascular tissue of the tree. She'll lay her eggs into that groove. It's about 600 eggs, so it's quite a lot. And those eggs will then, after about 6 or 7 weeks, they'll hatch into very, very small nymphs. They're about the size of a very small ant. And they'll start feeding on the sap flowing from that vascular tissue. And then they'll feed for a short period of time, and then they'll fall to the ground. They'll start burrowing into the ground and then start feeding on plant roots, both trees as well as like herbaceous plants. And then they'll hang out there really feeding and growing for the next 17 years. Then they will emerge in that 17th year. The nymphs will come back up to the surface of the soil, and the process starts over again.
And hats off to the folks over at the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. I don't think I'll ever look at a cicada the same way again. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.